Hello, I'm continuing my reviews on the Godzilla series with Godzilla and Mothra, The Battle for Earth. Now, Godzilla and Mothra, The Battle for Earth came out in 1992. I also came out in 1992, but that's not as important. Now, this is the 19th film in the Godzilla franchise, and the 4th film of the Heisei Godzilla series, and the film acts as sort of a loose remake of 1964's Mothra vs. Godzilla, while also taking plot elements from the original Mothra movie from 1961. Now, the film is directed by Keiko Imamura, if I'm saying his name right. Now, he would go on to direct several other Godzilla films. But the film is written by Kazuki Ōmori, who also wrote and directed Godzilla vs. Biollante and Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. Now, Godzilla and Mothra, I used to love this one as a kid, but as I got older, it became, honestly, my least favorite of the Heisei Godzilla series, but after rewatching it again, it's still not one of my favorites, but I've grown to appreciate it a lot more, and honestly, I understand why people like this one so much. Now, it's interesting to note that this was actually the highest grossing film of the Heisei series. Now, the film came out in Japan in December of 1992, so it made the majority of its money in 1993, and apparently this was the second highest grossing film in Japan in 1993 next to Jurassic Park, which obviously wasn't a Japanese movie, but that movie was a hit internationally. Now, Godzilla and Mothra, The Battle for Earth, is much more of a family film, and there's a much heavier emphasis on fantasy and comedy in this one. But if you approach it with the right mindset, it's honestly a pretty good movie. Now, the plot of Godzilla and Mothra, The Battle for Earth, is it's set sometime after the events of Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. Now, following his battle with King Ghidorah, Godzilla has been laying dormant at the bottom of the ocean, but a meteor lands, waking Godzilla up, but also triggering a series of devastating earthquakes. These earthquakes uncover a giant egg on this island called Infant Island, so this group of people go to investigate it, and there they discover these two fairies who call themselves the Cosmos. Now, in the original series, they were called the Shobijin, but in this series, they're called the Cosmos. But the Cosmos tell them that thousands of years ago there was a technologically advanced civilization on Earth, and there was a giant mystical moth called Mothra who was there to defend the Earth, but the people of this ancient civilization built a machine that could actually control the climate. But this offended the Earth, who according to the Cosmos is a living entity, so the Earth created a demon version of Mothra called Battra to punish mankind. But now it appears mankind is making the same mistakes that they made thousands of years ago, so Battra returns to punish mankind, so now the Earth is being threatened by not just Godzilla, but Battra as well. And in the movie, as the egg is being transported from Infant Island to Japan, it hatches, revealing a baby Mothra. Eventually, Mothra builds a chrysalis and matures to her final form, and now she has to defend the Earth from Battra and Godzilla, but it appears that Godzilla is such a great threat that she might have to team up with her demotic brother in order to stop Godzilla. Now, the main characters of Godzilla and Mothra are this divorced couple and their daughter, who are starting to come together again in the midst of all this. Now, the characters in the movie are certainly cliched, but they are endearing for the most part. I mean, the little girl is kind of annoying, but that could just be the dubbing, because I did not see this movie in its original Japanese with the English subtitles. I saw the English dub of the movie that Sony put out in the late 90s, and the dubbing is not very good at all. Now, for me, the most compelling character was the character of Kenji, who works for this corrupt businessman, and he starts off the movie as kind of a villain, where he actually ends up kidnapping the Cosmos to please his boss, but ultimately does see the error of his ways. You also get several characters from the previous Godzilla films showing up in this movie, like Miki Sagusa, but to be honest, her role in the movie is so small that you honestly could have cut her out of this film, and I don't think it would have affected the plot that much. Like, she really kind of feels like an afterthought in this movie. Like, she's really only there to sense when Godzilla's around because she has psychic powers. Also, a minor character from Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah shows up in a few scenes in this movie, and you get a few cameo appearances from one of the main characters of Godzilla vs. Biollante. Also, Akira Takarada has a small part in this movie. Now, Akira Takarada played the character of Ogata in the original Godzilla, and he played different characters throughout the Showa era. So it was cool seeing him again. Now, the special effects in the movie, for the most part, is really well done. I particularly like the fight scene at the end between Godzilla, Mothra, and Battra. And Battra is a really interesting kaiju, and it's a shame that he only showed up in one movie. I also like how even though this is in a different continuity than the Showa Godzilla series, the film remains pretty true to the traditional Mothra mythos. Like, they don't really change the mythos all that much. But Godzilla and Mothra, The Battle for Earth, is a pretty good movie. It is very cheesy, but this was meant to be more of a family film, which makes sense because the movies with Mothra have always been traditionally more lighthearted. The movie's biggest failing for me is how it handles its environmental message. Now, don't get me wrong, I do think that's a good message to have in a movie, and I do think it's really important to take care of the environment, but the way it's handled in this movie is very ham-fisted and really corny. Like, there's a way to do an environmentalist message subtly, and then there are ways to do it where it feels like you're watching an episode of Captain Planet. But overall, I do recommend this movie. It's not my favorite of the Heisei series, but it is decent. Now, as I pointed out already, this movie was a pretty big blockbuster in Japan at the time, and this would actually spawn basically a spin-off series called The Rebirth of Mothra. Now, technically, I don't know if you would really call them spin-offs, because the Rebirth of Mothra movies are clearly in a different continuity, but those movies most likely wouldn't exist if not for the success of this movie. Now, before I end this video, I want to cut to my friend Christian Feliciano, giving his thoughts on Godzilla and Mothra, The Battle for Earth.
Now, with Godzilla and Mothra, The Battle for Earth, what they did was so much better than what they did with Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. Because Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, they took King Ghidorah's origin and just made it so convoluted with, time travel, all this crazy stuff. But in Godzilla and Mothra, The Battle for Earth, it's pretty much the same as the original, but what they did was they just expanded the universe by creating a new villain. They created Battra, who is the evil Mothra, and that to me was a nice addition. You still got the fairies in this, which is nice, which, they didn't get rid of that because that would always worry somebody when there's a reboot. Are they going to add the fantasy stuff in it? Because in the new Godzilla films, if you notice, the fairies are not there. Mothra is still kind of magical, I guess, or mystical, I guess, or unless maybe the little girl's a fairy, I don't know. But in the original, at least they kept, this one, they at least kept the fairies and they kept a lot of the mythology. They at least kept a lot of the mythology, and it's pretty much just a remake of the original. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun. The humans in this are really interesting. Really fun to follow. And yeah, it's a really great film. Really enjoy this one. It's just, it's really, really good. I actually prefer it to Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah only because of, like I said in the last review, my biased opinion keeps me from praising Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah more than I do. And yeah. So, but that's it, Godzilla and Mothra, I recommend it for everybody. If you're a big fan of Godzilla, if you're a big fan of Mothra, if you want to see these characters again in the same film, if you watch the new one and you want to watch more Mothra, check it out. You'll really, 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 really enjoy it. And yeah, thank you so much. Bye-bye.